Today we're going to be looking at the Industrial Revolution, or I should say the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. So let's look at the big ideas. First was identify the origins, characteristics, and consequences of industrialization. The second is compare and contrast the industrialization of Russia, Japan, and Britain. And the third is describe the environmental impacts of industrialization and urbanization. So let's start with the fact that for most of history, people work and live in small farming villages. No matter which part of the world, most people live in rural areas. Only very few live in major urban cities. This is going to change in the mid-1700s with the Industrial Revolution and its beginning. And it begins in Great Britain. It's going to begin in Great Britain and spread from there. And this spread is a long, slow process. What we're going to see is simple tools are going to be replaced by machines, and the revolution is going to spread from Britain to the rest of Europe, North America, and eventually across the globe. So in 1750, most people work the land. They use handmade tools, and we consider these people to be very self-reliable. They make their own clothing, grow their own food. Pretty much, if they need something, they have to do it themselves. Along with that, they can only travel as far as their feet or horse-drawn carriage can take them. But this is going to change. By the 1850s, the Industrial Revolution is going to change these country villages into industrial cities and towns, and no longer will people be limited by their feet or horse-drawn carriage as the development of locomotives and steamships. Along with that, this is going to pave the way for the development of what we consider the West. And the West just refers to Great Britain, Western Europe, and eventually North America. We need to look at first the Agricultural Revolution, which is really going to start the change. For 11,000 years, the farming techniques that people had used have essentially been the same, essentially since people learned how to farm. And what we're going to see is the Dutch begin leading this agricultural revolution. They build earth walls, and these earth walls, which are known as dikes, essentially block out the sea and allow the Dutch to reclaim land to farm on. Along with that, they combine smaller fields and larger ones, making it more efficient to farm. And they begin using livestock fertilizer to renew their soil. The British are going to take these techniques and expand on them. They're going to continue messing around with the soil. One of the things that happens when you grow crops on land is it takes nutrients out of the soil. So in order to put nutrients back in, they begin mixing soil and using the practice of crop rotation. Along with that, Jethro Tull invents the seed drill, this invention you see below. And what this does is it deposits seeds in rows instead of just scattering them all over the place. And why this is important is because it allows farmers to tend to their crops much easier and harvest much easier, which makes farming much more efficient. The British also used the process of enclosure to increase the output of crops. And all this was very similar to what the Dutch were doing, in which they combine small peasant farms into large fields, and this makes them more efficient. They're able to produce more in a shorter amount of time. So the crop output rises. Along with that, so does the profits for farmers. However, not everybody wins. Many farm laborers are thrown out of work because they're simply not needed. They can do more work with less people because of how efficient they've become. Farmers, that is. So what happens is villages begin to shrink as farm workers leave them to find jobs in towns and cities. And it is these unemployed farm laborers who are soon going to become the labor force that's going to operate the machinery in the factories of the Industrial Revolution. So let's look more into the population changes, because that's going to play a big part in the Industrial Revolution. We're going to see massive population growth and shifting population from certain parts of countries to others. Here's a map of Britain, and what we're going to see in Britain in the course of 100 years, Britain is going to gain 4 million people, almost double its population. If you look here, this map on the left is from 1701, and the one on the right is from 1911. The darker the area, the more densely populated. So what we see is lightly shaded, and in 1911, very dark areas. These are the large urban city centers that are developing because of the Industrial Revolution. Along with that, Britain's not the only one. All of Europe is going to increase by 60 million in this same 100-year time period between 1700 and 1800. Finally, let's look at some of the early inventions of the Industrial Revolution, because this is going to change the way businesses operate. One of the areas is in the way people harness energy, and the biggest source at this time is coal. In 1712, Thomas Newcomen is going to develop a steam engine which is powered by coal. And the steam engine is designed to pump water out of mines so people can go and mine for minerals. Well, in 1764, James Watt's going to start messing around with Thomas Newcomen's invention and try to make it better. And he does. He creates a more powerful steam engine for machinery, and this steam engine is eventually going to lead to the production of locomotives and steam ships. Coal is also important in the production of iron. And iron is important because it is going to help build these new machines and steam engines. In 1709, a guy by the name of Abraham Darby is going to begin using coal to smelt iron. What that means, it's the process of separating iron from its ore. Why this is important is because iron becomes cheaper and it becomes of a better quality, which means it can be used more widely. This use is going to increase decade by decade. It's going to be used in machines, steam engines, locomotives, and actually Abraham Darby builds the first iron bridge as well. So what we're seeing is the Industrial Revolution is changing every part of people's lives. It's changing the way they eat, the way they work, the way they interact, where they live. And this is going to be a continuing trend. Let's review those big ideas before we go. One, identify the origins, characteristics, and consequences of industrialization. Two, compare and contrast the industrialization of Russia, Japan, and Britain. And the final one, describe the environmental impacts of industrialization and urbanization.